Have you ever been watching the news? You see one country do something to another, and you just think to yourself, wait a second, isn't there a law against that? If you've had that thought, you're not alone. There's this feeling that international law seems, well, kind of optional. Today, we're going to dig right into that feeling. So let's just get right to it. Is international law actually law? You know, in the same way we think about the laws that govern our own countries? This is not just some random question. It's one of the biggest, most argued over debates out there. And look, the skepticism usually comes down to these two really big points. First, you watch the news and it just looks completely useless sometimes, especially when a powerful country decides to do whatever it wants. And second, there's no world government, right? There's no global cop on the beat to make an arrest or enforce a ruling. So what gives? Well, a lot of the confusion here starts because we're basically comparing apples and oranges. We try to picture international law looking like the system we know at home, but its whole structure, its very foundation, is totally different. Think about it like this. National law, the law inside a country, is a vertical pyramid. You've got a government at the very top, and it makes and enforces the laws for everyone down below. Simple. But international law, it's completely flat. It's a horizontal network. You've got over 180 independent states that are all, at least on paper, legally equal. There's no one sitting above them. And that single difference changes absolutely everything. Okay, so if there's no one at the top forcing them to, why on earth would any country bother to follow these rules? Well, it turns out there are some incredibly powerful and maybe even surprising reasons that they do. First up, and this one is huge, is just plain old self-interest. Our world is so incredibly connected now. Countries rely on a stable, predictable system for everything. I'm talking about making sure your mail gets delivered across borders, that planes can fly safely, that you can even do business internationally. Following the rules isn't really about being nice. It's about making sure the whole global system, the system that benefits everyone, doesn't just fall apart. But it's not all just cold, hard logic. There's something else going on. Something a little more psychological. The simple act of calling a set of rules law creates this mental hurdle to breaking them. Nations are run by people, after all, and people just feel a stronger pull to comply with something when it's seen as a legitimate legal system. And third, becoming an international outlaw has a seriously high price tag. When a country just ignores international law, it can shatter its reputation and the trust other nations have in it. And that's not just about feelings. That translates into real-world pain. Trade deals can vanish, foreign aid gets cut, and all of a sudden, nobody wants to even sit down and negotiate with you anymore. You basically become a pariah. All right, I know what you're thinking. That's all well and good, but countries break these laws all the time. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because paradoxically, some of the best evidence that international law actually exists comes from what countries do when they break it. Here's the absolute key. When a country breaks a major international rule, they almost never, ever say, yeah, we broke the law, so what? It doesn't apply to us. No. Instead, they bend over backwards trying to argue that what they did was actually legal and justified under a different reading of the law. They're trying to win the argument inside the system, not by ignoring it. I mean, this is the perfect example. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, Saddam Hussein didn't stand up and say international law is a joke. Not at all. He actually made legal arguments trying to claim his invasion was justified. By trying to twist the law to his advantage, he was admitting that the law existed and had authority. And you see this pattern again and again and again. For every single one of these really controversial military actions, the countries involved put out these detailed legal papers to justify what they were doing within the framework of international law, whether they called it self-defense or humanitarian intervention or enforcing UN resolutions. The NATO action in Serbia is another classic case. The argument wasn't, we're more powerful, so we're doing this. The justification was built on a legal idea, the concept of a humanitarian purpose. It just goes to show even the most powerful players feel like they have to justify their actions inside the legal system, not outside of it. So maybe we're just using the wrong words here. Maybe international law isn't not law, but what some experts call weak law. And here's the crucial part. Weak doesn't mean it's not binding. The weakness is in its very different, much less organized way of handling enforcement. So if there's no global cop, how does enforcement actually happen? The best way to picture it is not as a single hammer, but as a whole toolbox, filled with a bunch of different tools that can be used to get the job done. And this toolbox is pretty diverse. You've got the heavy hitters, like the UN Security Council, which can authorize major actions. You've got formal courts, like the ICJ, But you've also got more subtle tools, like taking away a country's legal privileges, the right to self-defense, and of course, the huge power of global public opinion. Now, the UN Security Council is supposed to be the most powerful tool in the box. It can impose sanctions, even authorize military force. But, and this is a massive but, it has a critical weakness: the veto. Any one of the 5 permanent members, that's China, France, Russia, the UK, and the US, can kill any resolution, all by themselves. And this has led to total gridlock, time and time again. But the other tools can still pack a punch. Losing legal rights can mean real economic pain, like when the US froze Iranian assets. You've got the International Court of Justice, which settles legal fights between countries who agree to show up. And you can never, ever underestimate the power of public opinion, which gets focused by groups like Amnesty International, who shine a spotlight on abuses for the whole world to see. And the last big thing to understand here is that this system isn't stuck in the past. International law was originally built for a much simpler world, but it's changing, and it's changing fast, to try and keep up with the challenges we face today. I mean, the sheer scope of international law has just exploded. It started out as a pretty basic rulebook for how states should interact with other states. But now, it's grown to cover the rights of individuals, of groups, of organizations, and it's pushed into massive new areas like global trade, protecting the environment, and human rights. It is a much, much bigger deal than it was 100 years ago.
Which really brings us to the final critical question. This whole system was designed for a world of nations and physical borders. But now, as we face these truly global challenges that don't care about borders, things like climate change, pandemics, cyber warfare, is this horizontal system, with its unique toolbox, going to be enough to handle what's coming next?